And in this video, we are going to look at some things that help keep us on track. Specifically, we are going to go through 5 strategies for building health-promoting habits. So there's no getting around it. We all have a ton of habits, some of them good, some of them bad, and where we end up is going to be a product of those habits. It's up to us to decide whether we are victims or beneficiaries of these habits, because recovery from chronic illness isn't a one-time transformation for most of us. It is an accumulation of new, healthier habits that we keep long-term, that pull us out of our unwell state and keep us healthy and strong in the future. So a habit is essentially just a word for a specific behavior in your life that's been automated. And to make sure that my life is as easy and productive and successful as possible, I make sure to automate as many decisions as I possibly can. And once a decision has been automated, I forget about it and I never have to think about it or worry about it again. It's essentially turning a one-off decision into a rule. It's a difference between relying on willpower and creating a lifestyle change. One example for me is sugar consumption. I use sugar as an example a lot because it's something that I have struggled with big time in my life. I had a massive raging sugar addiction for years that I never thought that I was going to get under control. But slowly I did, and a piece of that for me was by creating a habit or a rule around sugar. So my rule for sugar for a while was that I didn't have it at all. I felt that I needed this to get my health back. But then once I was healthy, I didn't want to be too strict or too rigid in my living. So I came up with a rule to help me manage sugar. Because if I didn't have a rule, every time I was faced with a scenario that involved sugar, it was going to be willpower that I had to rely on, whether I was at a birthday party or at the grocery store, or someone offered me some treats at work. Every single time I have to figure out what I'm going to do. So my rule for myself that turned into this habit, which is now a lifestyle, is that I decided that I would only ever consume sugar on the weekend and never in my own home. So this one simple rule takes care of virtually every situation that could ever come up. So if I'm at work and someone offers me some sweet treats, assuming that I work a Monday to Friday job, I know that I'm not going to have any because I don't eat added sugar during the week. But if I'm at a birthday party at a friend's house on a Saturday night and they have some cake, I know that if I want some, I can. I don't even have to think about it. And it is really amazing how this simple thing can transform your life, because once you automate something, turn it into a habit, stop thinking about it, stop relying on willpower, it really does become that easy. Where the struggle comes in is where we make ourselves decide on an instance by instance basis and hope that our willpower is going to get us where we want to go. Now, a lot of what I have learned about habits came from a book called Atomic Habits by author James Clear, and he talks about the power of small incremental changes in habits over time. He calls them the compound interest of habits. So he talks about the power of making small changes, building in new small habits in our life. And in the short term, it can be hard to see how these things are having any impact in our lives. But in the long term, just like compound interest, the results can be really incredible. And another example he has is thinking about the trajectory of a plane. Now, if you shift it by just a few degrees, in the short term, it's not going to look like that made a big difference, but in the long term, it could result in that plane ending up in an entirely different country. Now, the flip side of this is that duplicating mistakes, small mistakes, day after day, can have the same compound effect on our lives and on our ability to reach our goals. So an accumulation of small choices, if they are the wrong ones, can actually have really toxic effects in our lives. So we need to take a look at where our behavior is getting us, but we also need to take a look at where it's not getting us as well. So even though it's hard to recognize, the glory really is to be found in the small, everyday things that you do. In my experience, recovering from chronic illness was about a lot of repetition. It was about getting up day after day after day and just consistently keeping doing these small things every single day and keeping an eye on that trajectory and seeing that the accumulation of all these things I was doing was compounding over time, and it really was getting me where I was trying to go. So let's look at 5 strategies for behavior change that I learned from James Clear in Atomic Habits. The first is the 2-minute rule. So what this is that when you're starting a new habit or a new behavior, it should take 2 minutes or less to accomplish. We need to have a a gateway habit. It needs to be easy and doable if we're going to stick with it. So if you want to start a daily journaling practice, start by committing to just 2 minutes per day. Or if it's meditation, start with committing to 2 minutes per day. And then over time, you can slowly increase that. And that 2 minute per day practice can become a 10-minute or 20-minute or 30 minutes or whatever your goal is. So any new habit that you're starting should not feel like a challenge. When the first 2 minutes of any habit is easy, it becomes a gateway to bigger and more helpful habits down the road. Point is just to master the habit of showing up, because a habit must be established before it can be improved. Now, a second strategy for building habits is something that is often referred to as habit stacking. So this is when you want to start a new habit in your life, you attach it to an existing habit. So for example, if you want to start your 2-minute daily meditation practice, attach it to something that you already do. So if you make yourself a cup of tea every single morning while the water is boiling, that's when you do your meditation. And put something by your kettle that reminds you of your new daily meditation practice. And then every time you put that kettle on, it's going to be your cue to start your meditation. A third strategy for having effective, beneficial habits that will help get us towards our goals is making sure that you know when to call it quits on a habit. Now, I can be especially bad for this because few things in life make me happier than having a plan and sticking to it to the letter. And my ego gets involved a bit. Maybe I've said that I'm going to do a certain thing for 6 months, maybe, go vegan or whatever it is. But then in that time, I see that it's really not working so well for me. But despite this, I want to stick to it just for the sake of sticking to it, because few things in life make me happier than having a plan and then following it through to the end. But you really need to learn to fail fast. You need to be able to evaluate as you go what habits are helping you and which ones aren't, and have that ability to walk away and abandon those ones that just, even though they sounded good in theory, they just aren't getting you anywhere. Now, a fourth strategy for having good habits in your life to help get you towards your goals is to make your behavior change an identity change. So we are working with that ego again. So let's say you are trying to start exercising. If that is something that is healthy and safe and appropriate for you, then you need to take on the identity of a person who exercises. Perhaps it's buying some, fancy workout clothes, or getting a mat or some things for your home that signify that you are someone who exercises. Because when you make something a part of your identity and your pride gets involved, you will fight tooth and nail to stick to it, because this is who I am. This is what I do. So if I believe that I am an exerciser and I've got the clothes and I've got the mat, or I've got whatever it is, I've got the playlist that I made on Spotify for my workouts, like, this is who I am. I'm going to want to behave in ways that confirm that to myself and to everybody else. But the power of identity can be a double-edged sword. So if you identify yourself as someone who is lazy, or someone who eats a lot of junk food, or whatever that might be, then you can get stuck in that as well. You can emulate the behaviors of that identity just because that is the identity that you have taken on. So you need to decide what kind of person you want to be, and then prove that to yourself over time with small changes and small wins as you go. And you don't need to be perfect. It's not going to be a flawless line, going up on a chart showing how you get better every single day at whatever this is. It's probably going to be a bit jagged. Some days will be better than others. But just look at the overall trajectory of where you're going. As long as the overall trajectory is going towards your goal, then you're doing all right. And the fifth strategy for shaping behavior is to set your environment up for success. Our environment is incredibly important in determining how successful we will be in reaching our goals. So let me go back to my favorite old nemesis, sugar. If I've decided that I want to cut out sugar, then deciding to meet a friend for tea at a cafe that has my favorite cake on display is probably a really bad idea. Or if I'm trying to spend less money, hanging out in a shopping mall, probably not a great plan. Or if I don't want to drink alcohol anymore, either hanging out in bars or hanging out, at friends' places who I know do consume a lot of alcohol is really going to be setting myself up to fail. So actively shape your environment, not just where you go, but the things that are in that environment. So if you're cutting out junk food, make sure that your home doesn't have any junk food in it. Or if you're trying to start exercising, have a yoga mat out someplace ready to go, or a gym bag by the door to remind you to go. Again, we chalk up so much of what we do or what people accomplish to willpower and strength, but they are really overrated. Having a plan is so much more important. By having a plan, you remove the tendency to fall into old habits and instead create a new identity, a healthier, habitually happier you.